My name is Sarah Jenkins, and I'm a private practice clinician in Tempe, Arizona. I work with adults and adolescents, primarily those that have histories of trauma and things that are traumatic, such as sexual assault, sexual abuse, ritual abuse, domestic violence, things of that nature. Now, of course, if you're a clinician, you probably know that many folks don't walk into your office and say, hey, I have a history of assault or a history of abuse, and this is where I know my symptoms are coming from. And if you're someone who's looking for therapy, you might not even think that this video would pertain to you. But I ask you to just take a look at it and see, because it may. If it doesn't, you might know someone who it does help. So this video actually is to provide people with grounding skills. And what in the world is a grounding skill? Well, essentially what I found through the years in working with trauma survivors is that many of them, if not probably all of them, talk about something that we clinicians call dissociation. Now, dissociation is a nice clinical way of basically saying not feeling connected to yourself. Dissociation sounds like many things to many people. It sounds like I'm not connected to myself. It sounds like I don't know where I am. I don't feel part of my body. If they're talking about something that's happened to them in the past, they might say things like, it's not happening to me, it's happening to someone else. I feel like I'm watching it from another side of the room. I feel like I'm not there. So already some of you might connect with that language and might want to continue to watch this, because dissociation might be something that you're experiencing. Or if you're a clinician, you probably know clients who have said those very same words to you. So why do we need to look at this topic? When people are working on things that we call anxiety or depression or any of these myriad of symptoms that people come in to see therapists for, many times grounding skills are necessary because they're actually getting triggered because of their past traumas, and that's making it harder for them to do whatever they need to do in therapy. And for those of you who are maybe not seeing a therapist or are really dealing with these things on a day-to-day basis, you probably have a hard time doing things like feeling present when you're at work. Maybe you're triggered by working in an environment. Maybe certain things about that environment remind you of past things that have happened to you. Maybe people that you know are triggering for you. Maybe even your own children are triggering for you. And maybe you just feel disconnected a lot of the time and don't feel part of the environment that you're in. And that can be really disconcerting and very scary and very overwhelming. So grounding skills are a way to get yourself connected again when you start feeling that overwhelming feeling. Keep in mind that if you dissociate, dissociation actually is a coping skill. Unfortunately, it's a coping skill that's gone awry because you actually want to feel somewhat present in order to live your day-to-day life, but your body says, hey, you know what? This thing that you're dealing with right now is really overwhelming, and I don't think you're safe, so I'm going to help you check out. It's really hard to maintain your life when you're checking out all the time, isn't it? So here are some grounding skills to help you. And I do hope that if you're seeing a therapist, you'll take this with you and share this with them and maybe use some of them and talk to a therapist about what your needs are. If you're a current client of mine, these are things that we've already talked about, and this is an extra set of skills for you. And if you're not seeing a therapist, maybe you'll consider finding one, or even give me a call and we can talk more about it. So one of the first things you can do if you're feeling disconnected and not grounded is actually start counting the number of objects around you. So if you're feeling disconnected and disoriented and out of your body, say in your kitchen, start counting the kitchen tiles. Start counting the number of objects in the room. Start counting anything that you can. And the reason is because we want your left side of the brain to actually start kicking in, because when you have a history of trauma, the emotional side, which is the right brain actually takes over when you're getting triggered, and we want the left brain to kick in a little bit more. Another thing you can do is actually imagine that you are connected to a string with a small weight on it. So let's say that you actually have a string that goes from the tip of your head right here, and the weight actually comes down all the way down through the bottom of that string and connects with the ground below you. What you can do is imagine that string going all the way through the center of your being, straightening your back up, straightening your torso, and allowing you to feel more grounded and connected to the floor beneath you. Another thing you can do that's very similar to that is actually imagine that your feet are like roots. So those roots actually spread through the ground and put yourself closer to the ground. And if you need to really imagine your feet gripping the ground as roots, allow your feet to grip the roots of the ground as well. So that can be a really good visual. Now, if you're not a real visual person, you can also perhaps find the picture of a tree, or maybe even say some words that remind you of that. I feel solid. I'm connected to the ground. I'm part of the earth. Even if those things are hard for you, maybe you can write them down to help remind you. Another thing you can do is find something that smells good to you that actually isn't triggering. So for example, find something that smells comforting rather than something that would upset you. If you have an aversion to coffee, for example, for whatever reason, you don't want to put a smell of coffee near you if that's what triggers you. But if you like lavender, it feels like a very calming smell, which many people do like lavender, put that on something that you can carry with you. Maybe you can, if you're a woman, you can put it on your neck and use it as a perfume to help ground you. Or maybe if you're someone who likes to have that smell with you, you could put on a piece of cloth or a piece of fabric that really connects to you. That's something you can do as well. Another thing that you can do is also imagine that your breath helps center you. Now, this doesn't mean that you want to start when if you're hyperventilating, noticing I'm hyperventilating. What you want to do is actually start counting your breaths. So on the in breath, count in, and on the out breath, count out. It's not about paying attention to how you're breathing. It's again about getting the left side of your brain to get activated, to pay attention to your breath, and also help that part of you that can observe to kick in a little bit more and observe the fact that you are able to become present. Another coping skill you can use to help ground is you can actually grab a piece of ice and literally just transfer it from one hand to the other, because that can help get your physical body to go, hey, you know what? I'm feeling something that's different from what's triggering me. So that feeling of the ice in your hands can be very grounding as well. Another thing to remember is that you are not as old as you feel. Many times my clients, when they're traumatized or they have histories of abuse of any kind, they tend to forget that because their emotional body goes, oh my gosh, it's happening again. I feel like I'm this age when this happened, and they forget their chronological age. So do something to remind yourself of how old you are. Remember the date of your birth, but then go, you know what? Today is, and put today's date in your mind and remember that as a mantra, okay? You can even use a mantra of I'm safe, it's okay now, I'm happy, whatever it is that would be grounding for you to help you. So those are some of the things you can do. I have some other ideas, and certainly feel free to check out my website if you want more of those. If you're a therapist who is in practice and wants more tips and tricks for working with clients that have these issues, I do workshops around working with folks that have dissociative features and, of course, trauma in their backgrounds. And I'd certainly be happy to meet with you and talk to you about that if you want a little more information. So my website is www.dragonflyinternationaltherapy.com. My practice is called Dragonfly International Therapy.